Ms. Hedlund, you said in your testimony that you've got the right pieces and the right people in place. Do you currently have any private investment in the project?
Is there currently any private investment in the Northeast Corridor?
Correct.
Yes, there is, and it's in the stations. As Ms. Norton is familiar with, the Union redevelopment of Union Station involves a significant public-private partnership with a private real estate developer, and the same is true with the proposed redevelopment of Moynihan Station in New York. So, yes, with respect to stations, there is a great opportunity to leverage private investment for the development of those stations to pay for the transportation function of those stations.
And how about as far as phase one of the rail or the environmental process?
What we will be doing in phase one is to evaluate what potential private investment might be. That is definitely part of the scope of work of phase one, so we will be studying that.
And how about phase two? What type of private investment are you looking for in phase two?
Well, we'll find out in phase one what we, that's what phase one is to find out, is to what the potential is for private investment for projects going forward.
Unlike in California, the Northeast Corridor service provides, my numbers here show 75% of the rail air market. What's the proportion of passenger rail transport in the air rail market for California?
I don't have those numbers, but I know there's been a study of what the impact of the high-speed rail project would be on the congestion between San Francisco and Los Angeles, how much of that traffic is expected to shift to rail. I don't have those numbers with me, but I'd be happy to get those from the authority and make them available to you in the record.
And you also would have, or the authority would assume it would also have a 30-year projection?
I don't know exactly what the nature of the projections are, but we'll get the information that they have and make it available to you.
Thank you. And you currently have the 30-year projection for the Northeast Corridor?
For the air-rail split?
Yeah.
That I do not know. I would defer to Mr. Boardman on this. The introduction of the Acela service itself in 2000, I think the air-rail split was something like, 30-70 or 40-60, and then it flipped. It's now 75-25. The overwhelming number of people going between Washington, D.C. and New York prefer to take the train, and it's not because that it's always cheaper, because the Acela service is not. It's because of the time savings and the convenience.
Mr. Boardman, for the Northeast Corridor, 80% of the population lives within 25 miles of the Northeast Corridor, making the rail very, very accessible. How would you compare that with California?
Depends on the part of California. One of the things I can answer, Congressman, is that the air rail service between San Diego and L.A. is entirely rail, because it just doesn't work the way that as close as they are to each other and the way that it operates. But when you get to something like the L.A. to San Francisco, you really only got the Coast Starlight, and so there isn't a sufficient amount of data that would really tell you what would really happen here. So from that regard, the old train, and I can't remember right now what they called it, I guess it was the Coast Daylight, was the primary way they moved up until 15 years ago or so between San Francisco and L.A., and it was probably the most profitable of the private railroads back years ago in regard to that. In terms of the Northeast Corridor, we have a projection of what the revenues would be 30 years down the line, and probably very little air service in terms of Boston to Boston to to New York and New York to Washington, because you'd be at an hour and a half between Boston and New York, and then another hour and a half or an hour and 34 minutes between New York and Washington. So you would really wind up with very little air service. And that, if you remember back in 2008, and you may not, but there was a great deal of discussion by the aviation, or former aviation executives, that that's something we really should do in the Northeast, so that those airports today could really be used for longer distance travel, and that we use the mode that made the most sense, which would be rail in those corridors. That would garner us, our expectation is, pretty close to $5 billion in revenue a year, with about $1 billion plus or minus coming out of that in terms of profit.
So you cannot draw a direct correlation between California's high-speed rail and Northeast Corridor? I mean, they're just two completely different.
Well, not here. I mean, excuse me. I don't know if your question's done. We can't. I can't draw that conclusion here because you don't have the right data sets. We may have some folks that have an analysis, and I can look at that and get you an answer back.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Hanna.